Pleasure that we are here tonight to embark on this significant and vital initiative. This meeting is a part of our ongoing Family Academy series aimed to connect families and schools to create a strong school partnership, which is so important for all of our students. As we navigate the complexities of our daily lives, it becomes increasingly evident that mental health is the cornerstone of all of our wellness. This workshop is going to focus on mental health and the impact of stress on children, with the second half of the workshop focusing on how adults can intervene and support their children. So it becomes, we start building their resilience. Our expert presenter, Stephanie Vieira. Stephanie comes with, a lot of experience. She's a licensed social worker and received a certificate in assessing and treating psychological trauma from Boston University. Stephanie comes with 10 years of experience as a therapist working with children, adults, and families. 2 years working as a clinician at the Family Resource Center in collaboration with the Fall River Juvenile Courts to offer support for children and families. We're very fortunate that Stephanie joined Fall River Schools. She's now one of our school adjustment counselors. So thank you, Stephanie, for coming tonight and presenting to our families.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay? Wonderful. It's good to see you all here, and I certainly appreciate the opportunity to meet with all of you and to have this talk tonight. I can tell you, everything that Cindy had shared, certainly experience in the social work field since the age of 19, and truly love helping people, and thought it was my dream job to end in the public schools working with children. So I'm very fortunate to be there as a school adjustment counselor for the last 4 years. I'm also a parent, so I know the part of being, a family, the challenge and the rewards that come with that. So tonight's presentation is hopefully going to shed some light, again, to mental health, stress, and how we as adults can help. But it's all interwoven, right? We can't discuss children without discussing families and vice versa. So at any point, if you have any questions, thoughts, ideas, comments, I'm open to all of the above. I do ask you to use the chat only because once I start presenting, I won't be able to see all of you or hands raised. If you do put it in the chat, I certainly will try to be aware of that and address it as soon as I see it. So thank you. And just a side note, I'm a social worker and a mom. I am not a public speaker by nature, so just bear with me. I'm going to share my screen now. So let's see how this goes. Okay, is everyone else able to see that? Wonderful. Okay, so this is Mental Health Matters and building resilience in families. But I will touch upon different ages. There will be a lot of information presented. So again, at any point, anything you need clarity on, please refer to the chat. So tonight's agenda, again, is looking at number 1, discussing the importance and factors that contribute to mental health. 2, review the impact of stress on overall functioning. And 3, talk about how adults can best support children. And also the tips at that point can support us all as adults, right? Because mental health and stress and how that impacts all of us is across the ages, not just specific to any factor, age factor, I should say. So this can be hopefully helpful for all of us. Again, like I mentioned, you can't mention a child without, also talking about and including a family. It's all combined and interwoven, which is a good thing because we're all here to support each other, right? Support is a phenomenal way of seeing anybody, no matter what their age is, through a lot of difficulties that life can bring, both naturally and just in the age that we live in today. So again, just looking at, how it comes together and how we can best support each other and especially our children to see their futures, be brighter and more strength and more resilient, I should say. So just a few things, I'm going to put a few quotes in. just to keep in mind as I talk. So this one is regards to your child's mental health is more important than their grades, which is crossed out, and of course, anything. So now being in the school department, I'm very aware of how important grades are and certainly encourage good grades. But the point of this being, if we don't have, our child sitting in front of us with good mental health or positive mental health, or at least being able to best manage their mental health, grades are going to be hard for them to come by. So just a reminder, it's the foundation for everything we do actually through our daily lives. So looking at, mental health and how, of course, it matters for all ages, it's defined as a person's condition with regard to their psychological and emotional well-being. Mental health is an important part of everyone's overall health. And in fact, of course, it's just important as physical health. And intervention should be sought out when needed. So just like we go to a doctor, if we're not feeling well, we have a cough that's going on. This time of year, this tends to happen. Same thing with mental health. It might be more difficult to see in somebody, but certainly if there are concerns, there are specialists out there who can help to support and intervene. I'll talk more about that at the end, but certainly, we're here to help, and we just need to know that there's a concern in order to look more into that. Mental health impacts thoughts, feelings, actions, and behaviors every day. And again, that's for every one of us, as soon as a child is born, right up to, the years that we're living up into in our elder years. So in every day, it's influencing us. Again, it plays a role in how people make choices, how we relate to others, and how we handle stress. So the importance of mental health is amazingly strong, and it's as strong for us as adults as it is for our children. And again, it doesn't know an age, right? This is always, developing, and we want to strengthen it at every part of our life. So looking at children and mental health development, childhood and adolescence are critical times for mental development as the brain is rapidly growing. And I'll talk more about the brain growth a little bit into it. I don't get too technical because that can get overwhelming, even for me. So I have simplified it. So hopefully even, someone in kindergarten could understand what I'll tell you about later with the brain. Development of good mental health in early years is important for overall health and well-being through our lifespan. So certainly things that we learn about, absorb, and take in our childhood will remain with us in how we're wired and how we see the world and how, again, we interact with others. So it carries through our lifespan. It's so important then to have this strong foundation in these early years. Mental health disorders, which often start in childhood, can impact children's healthy mental, emotional, and behavioral development. And unfortunately, the number of children experience mental health concerns is rising. I hear a lot of mentioned with COVID. I hear a lot mentioned just with the state of some of the violence in the world we live in today and how things are changing in that way. This impacts our children as well as it impacts us. So that truly is the reason behind some of these increasing numbers. And again, the skills that I'm going to talk about later today, you can use to address any one of these, stressors or negative experiences in helping children and adults move forward. Mental health facts for children. According to Child and Adolescent Psychiatric Clinics of North America, 21.8% of U.S. children ages 3 to 17 have one or more of the common mental, emotional, and behavioral health conditions. And that's of January of 2022. Sometimes it's hard to find current relevant information. This was the closest that I had come across. So that leaves 1 in every 5 children, which doesn't seem to be a rising number. But then again, these are children that have been, noticed and diagnosed. Certainly that number is probably a little bit greater. And the most commonly diagnosed mental health disorders in childhood are, and I've listed the top 3 and in order by usually how they're seen. So we have ADHD, which comes in the top most diagnosed, disorder. It stands for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and it's usually noticeable before the age of 6. The thing I think about that age of 6 number is that's usually when students are, children are starting school or in kindergarten, and usually, it's picked up with parents and teachers communicating. Next, we have anxiety. It comes in second to ADHD. It can be seen as early as 6 months, and that's with separation anxiety. Now, some separation anxiety is certainly part of the normal, child-parent bond, and children can outgrow that, certainly as they age. At age 5, we start to see the development of phobias and true fears that children can start to have. The last one that comes in as diagnosed in third is depression, and that's been seen as early as age 3. Again, who knows, prior to that, certainly things could be going on in the child that we don't know. But certainly age 3 is where a lot of the statistics start. I then broke down and just kind of highlighted some of the signs and symptoms you may see in these top 3 disorders. I know there may be a lot to it, a lot to share, but just want you to note that if you are seeing anything in your child, certainly reach out to school, reach out to a pediatrics office. Great resource of information and people who've worked with your child and have history on your child if you do have any concerns. So with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and sometimes it's just looked at as attention deficit disorder, the hyperactivity may or may not be there, hence the 2 categories. But the first one is looking at inattentiveness. Difficulty concentrating and focusing is what it's mainly known for. And that includes, you might see in your child, having a short attention span and being easily distracted, making careless mistakes in schoolwork and other areas, appearing forgetful or losing things, being unable to stick to tasks that are tedious or time-consuming, appearing to be unable to listen or carry out instructions, constantly changing activity or task, having difficulty organizing tasks. And then we look over if the hyperactivity is part of what is seen or diagnosed, then it also could look like being unable to sit still, especially in calm or quiet surroundings, constantly fidgeting, being unable to concentrate on tasks, excessive physical movement, excessive talking, being unable to wait their turn, acting without thinking, interrupting conversations, little or no sense of danger. So just a little bit more on attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. The symptoms occur in more than one situation, such as home and at school or community. So in order for a child to have this diagnosis, we cannot just see these behaviors happening at home, but at school and community, they're doing okay. So it's going to see in 2 places at least in order for this. Again, that's why the age of 6 comes up, because you have a child who now enters school or has been in school, and the teachers and the staff may be picking up on something that mom or dad is picking up on, or a guardian as well. Children may have symptoms in one more area, like I talked about. So they could just have that category 1, or they could have category 1 and 2. These symptoms cause significant problems in child's functioning, such as underachievement in school. It also can lead to poor social interactions with other children and adults, problems with discipline. And they also can have other co-occurring mental health concerns as well. This happens in a lot of mental health concerns or conditions, I should say, where there could be one or more things going on. And a lot of times too, what ADHD may look like, and will turn out as we talk about anxiety, is anxiety. So sometimes things are kind of overlying each other. I know I'm presenting you a wealth of information. Keep in mind as I go through this is for your knowledge. If there are any concerns you have about your child, again, reach out to the people that have been in your child's life and there to support. We're happy certainly to help. I've also heard that from a lot of pediatricians' office. They're there to help as long as they know about the concern. So looking at anxiety. So when young children feel anxious, they cannot always understand or express what they are feeling. And you may notice this in younger children. They become irritable, tearful, or clingy, have difficulty sleeping, wake in the night, start wetting the bed, or have bad dreams. So we're talking really about the little ones there. In older children, you may notice that they lack confidence to try new things or seem unable to face simple everyday challenges. They find it hard to concentrate, have problems with sleeping or eating, have angry outbursts, have a lot of negative thoughts, or keep thinking that bad things are going to happen. Again, anxiety symptoms or signs can mimic ADHD. So if you see any certain thing in your child, I wouldn't assume this is what's going on. Again, reach out and get that help. And simply remember this. Any signs you're seeing in your child, and as any signs and symptoms I'm reading here, the list can seem lengthy, but it all doesn't happen at once. And all these behaviors indicate to this people are going to help you is what it is that they can narrow down that's going on with your child. So certainly in order for child to anxiety, they don't need to meet every one of these criteria. But if you're concerned as a guardian, you just, reach out and they can help you go through it. So when it comes to anxiety, children can feel anxious about different things at different ages. Like I talked about, sometimes in really young children, you see separation anxiety creep up. They, outgrow that, and then suddenly they have possibly other anxieties. Many of these worries are a normal part of growing up, like I mentioned. I wouldn't call it a fad, certainly, but just a stage, that we go through based on where they are developmentally, what their concerns might be that they might not be able to voice to you. Anxiety becomes a problem for children when it starts to get in the way of their everyday life. Severe anxiety like this can harm children's mental and emotional well-being. And I just want to stay on that. When it says harm, it certainly isn't have to be long-lived. If you see these signs and you reach out and intervention is given, it really goes a long way, in helping children realize what they're going through, if it's age appropriate for them to realize it and know how to handle it or manage it. Children experiencing these symptoms may become withdrawn and go to great lengths to avoid things or situations that make them feel anxious. That's also in adults. If something's not going to make you feel good, it's going to stir you up inside, our thought is to just escape it as a coping skill. And sometimes escape can be a very short way of coping, absolutely. But when we want our children to learn long-term how to best manage or how to best manage in different scenarios to carry them through life, that's when, again, you reach out and work on helping them manage. Depression. I will not go through this whole list with you. It's lengthy, and I just don't want you to be sleeping 20 minutes into the presentation. So I did bold the first 4 because they are most prominent in depression. The most I think people usually think of is like a sadness or low mood that does not go away. It's usually more of a longer term thing. However, it also can be seen situational where it might just pop in for a little bit based on a life event, right? Some normal things that we as adults would even feel sad about. Being irritable or grumpy all the time, not being interested in things they used to enjoy, and feeling tired and exhausted a lot of the time. Again, some of this, children, teens, even adults find interests and then decide, hey, you know what, that's not for me anymore. So that's not this. That would be a child or an adult who just simply doesn't feel like they're interested in much. They don't have enjoyment in life, right? And then also the idea of feeling tired and exhausted, something that we all can feel, especially this time of year. Weather's changing. When children go back to school, that's a big change from the break of the summer. So there are times in life where we're just tired and there's nothing more to it. But this is kind of, you see something that's lingering or you see a change in your child in that way, certainly, again, you just want to express that concern. So with depression, the longer symptoms go on, the more likely it's to disrupt your child's life and turn into a long-term problem. Again, long-term problem does not mean anyone's doomed. We just want to help identify what's going on and help the child age appropriately manage what's going on, even if we as the adults are doing more of the work because maybe they're young and they're not fully understanding what it's all about, but just to be intervening and helping them through. Physical symptoms such as headaches and stomach aches are common signs, especially in young children. This is often what pediatricians hear about. A child is taken, guardian takes them to the doctors, and they're having these concerns. So that's a big indicator. Not the one and only. So I don't want you to worry if suddenly a child has a headache, but just know that if you're seeing a pattern with this, it's something to address with a pediatrician. Problems at school and problem behavior can be a sign of depression in children and young people. Children and young people who might not have the words, the language to express what they're going through, oftentimes it will come out in behavior, right? So underneath any behavior, certainly there's a feeling or a need to be addressed. Older children who are depressed may misuse drugs or alcohol. Certainly that is very concerning. Again, if you're seeing any substance use, it's always great to acknowledge what is the behavior beneath it, or what are some of the patterns going along with that again can be addressed. Sometimes depression is triggered by a difficult event or a mixture of events. Unfortunately, sometimes, in life, what they say, when it rains, it pours. But sometimes it's just a single event that's just a little difficult for someone to get through. Often children have problems with anxiety along with depression. So again, some of these symptoms, can can look like each other, or, anxiety and depression like to hold hands and be friends. It doesn't mean anything more than it's what you present as a concern, and it all gets addressed. I do see a hand raised. Cindy, I'm not.
Stephanie, you can
Yeah.
just continue. If anybody has questions, they can put it in the chat.
Okay.
And we can address those there.
Thank you. So moving on to stress, as if I didn't give you enough information when it comes to mental health, but all of this works out in the end, trust me. And it's good for us to have this awareness and acknowledge this in our children or other loved ones who may be older than 18, to say, hey, you know what, this doesn't seem right, or maybe this child or person could need some extra support. So in talking about stress, stress is defined as a state of mental or emotional strain or tension resulting from adverse or very demanding circumstances. People of all ages experience stress. Of course, as adults, we certainly get that with adult responsibilities, but certainly children experience stress as well. Some stress is natural, healthy, and needed for survival. It's how we, know the difference between maybe crossing the street in a moment when a car is coming or not, because our body is good about telling us, hey, this is not the right time for this. But when stress is ongoing or elevated for extended periods of time, it becomes unhealthy and impacts overall functioning of the whole body. That's, again, when you see something that just doesn't see or feel or seem right. So with children and stress, children are impacted by stress as much as adults. However, children experience and deal with stress in different ways. Stress is often not a familiar term for children. They may use words like worried, confused, annoyed, or angry. And sometimes it comes across in what they say about themselves or the situation. So they might not even come to you and say, I'm worried or I'm confused. You might just get a sense of frustration in how they're explaining a school situation or a situation with a peer. Many stressful events that an adult can manage will cause stress in a child, and that impacts a child's feeling of safety and security. So what we may be able to handle later in life, and we might feel is a minor thing, for a child, it may seem like a major thing. And I'll get into reasons for that in a little bit. And they may alter their behaviors based upon the setting, environment, and adults and peers around them. So they might be feeling really stressed and they can come to you as a guardian, or maybe they go to a teacher at school and express what is going on with them. But then they might act perfectly fine in another setting. So sometimes clearly stress, as we know as adults, we express stress to the people we feel we can trust, and they're going to be there for us. Factors impacting children's ability to deal with stress. And here we are, and this can vary between children and adults, and sometimes adults also have the same struggles. In younger years, we see that they're lacking identified coping skills and outlets. Again, that's something we look to in the schools. We look to build upon, meeting with our children and building up their coping skills, as well as at home, right? It's not the concern or the struggle that's the problem. It's how we handle it and how we get through it. And that's where we as adults can certainly step in and help other, children and other adults. Mental health disorders impacting development. And so, again, if we have a child who's dealing with anxiety, if we have a child who's dealing with depression, even if it's for short term, that's going to have an effect on their overall mental health in that moment. Again, it's not doom. It's just that they're not at 100% operating from a brain, that isn't working on other things, right? Or dealing with other things. And then the biggest part, which I'll go over in simple terms, is the time frame on brain development, which is under construction until the mid-20s. And I'm going to refer to the upstairs and downstairs brain. So adult brains are far more developed because time has gone by for adults, and more time, I should say, as opposed to children whose, again, brain is still developing and neurons and connections are still being made. And that is going to factor into their choices, their decisions, and how they're viewing and seeing the world. So that brings us to our downstairs brain. So if you look at this picture of the brain, again, in very simple terms, You can see if a line of differentiation from the different blues. So the line in the middle, if you look down, is considered the downstairs brain. So this is the most active part of the brain in childhood years. It's also the most active part of the brain when someone is highly stressed, when someone is facing trauma. It is the brain that gets us through and helps us be automatic and responsive in that way versus logical and thinking. So again, it allows us to react before we think. It's responsible for emotional responses, and it really does react to stress to help us be, again, responsible and get through and survive. So if you think back to what I said with stress being part of, it's good and healthy as long as it's kept within limits. This part of our brain helps keep us going. It's responsible for, our breathing and automatic things for our survival. So if children are primarily in this downstairs brain, then think about where they're at. They're concerned with their safety. They're very reactive. And this is where the emotions come from. So this is an overactive part of the brain in childhood. And it's there biologically for a reason. Children are wired to be this responsive. But again, when it comes to logically getting through a difficult math test or a difficult challenge in life overall, when they're reacting from this part of the brain, they're, again, being emotional, responsive, dysregulated at times, and we will get into that. So then we have the upstairs brain, the little bit of a brighter blue at the top from the line up. And you can see in the description, it's responsible for thinking, reasoning, problem solving, planning. Unfortunately, for young people, this isn't fully developed until they're in their late 20s. So time doesn't even give them a chance to be as logical as I think adults sometimes expect them to be. They're just not there yet in their connection, and it's not their fault. It's biology doing the job in, following the plan that it's made. So again, this upper part of the brain allows us to think before we act. It can think about potential consequences. It's good with decision-making and reasoning. It controls emotions and the body regulation. It brings about empathy awareness, self-awareness, and concentration and focus. So if you can see, this is kind of the higher problem solving and operations our brains can do. And in children, with them not being there yet, it is something that we as adults have to help them work on. Common childhood stressors. This includes school. So schoolwork, grades, and performance can be very difficult and concerning for children. Social, so keeping friends, bullying, fighting in with peer groups. Transitions, changes home, neighborhoods, and school. Family, including changes in the family, divorce, marriage, loss of a loved one. Could be even addition of, a new cousin or a new aunt. So a lot of transitions happens in families. It could be common stressors of the self, going through body changes when they get a little bit older, having negative thoughts about self. The environment, so family concerns about money, housing, neighborhood safety. And sometimes as adults, we try really hard to, spare our children from some of the concerns we have and some of the worries we have. But they're really good about absorbing things, right? They're made to survive and they're made to thrive. And so they pick up on things sometimes when you're not even certain about it. And then I did highlight the holidays as a stressor, because even though we think of the holidays as maybe a joyous time, for a lot of children, it can be that they're observing some stress that adults may have. And there's also a change in their routine with the school break. And that can be something that, they're looking forward to, but yet that change in routine sometimes can bring on stress just because it's not what they're used to. So I've broken down just by age group. These lists are a little bit shorter for you, but the signs and symptoms of mental distress look different, again, through the different age groups. And that's because we're in different periods of developing. It's just nature. It's just where we're at. So in the 4 to 7 range, you might see regression in younger behaviors, such as bedwetting, temper tantrums, thumb sucking, trouble paying attention, separation anxiety, as I discussed before. But at this point, even though it can still be part of one child's normal development, because everyone develops in their own time, separation anxiety is usually seen in much younger. So this, again, might be something if you see between 4 and 7 age range, you bring up to your pediatrician. Battles about eating and bedtime may be reoccurring, and stomach aches. So again, signs and symptoms of stress. Signs and symptoms of mental distress in ages 7 through 10, fears for their own health. They may also fear their families or have fear for their families because developmentally they're gaining ability to see another perspective. So maybe they know a guardian or a sibling is going through a tough time, and they might be fearful of the outcome for that person, because the world at this age range is not just about them, but they're also seeing what is around them. So being able to take on that perspective. They can have signs of being angry and irritable and have negative self-talk. Signs and symptoms, ages 10 to 13. We could have avoidance, decreasing grades, resistant to complete their work, and less likely to talk about their worries and fears. So now it gets a little trickier in this age range, and that's where maybe, certainly observing signs as the adult can be helpful, because they may not come to you even with the language at this point of being able to express it. They may not come to you and express it. Might be just very difficult for them. They may not want to get into it. They may not even know where it's coming from. They might feel silly. There's a number of reasons why they may keep it to themselves. So just being on the lookout for any changes that you do see in your child. Age 14 and plus, the list gets a little bit bigger, certainly. And this is an age, of course, the preteens and teenage years, where there's so many changes going on from head to toe. So it can bring on a variety of experiences. So it includes being moody or irritable, withdrawing from activities they once enjoyed, sleeping all day and up all night, breaking curfew and social distancing rules, a sense of helplessness and hopelessness, increased anxiety, feeling trapped due to developmentally being ready to gain independence to move on. But maybe adults in life, certainly, as we should be, we keep the limits going, give them a little breathing room, but certainly keep managing. Some of them at this age feel they can go out and live on their own. It's interesting. Isolating and loss of energy. So again, as our children age and even into adulthood, I have a list for that as well. You see that there's different ways that stress can be shown. But again, it's a sign. It's a sign of something it needs to be done. Some help needs to be given. And that's just the important part to pick up on. So I added this. I won't go through it again. It's a very lengthy list, just to show you again, as adults, even though we've outgrown some of the things in our childhood, some of it goes with us, and just the everyday life stressors, are something we all deal with. So as you can see, there's 4 different categories here, including emotional, physical, cognitive, behavioral. So stress does show in many different ways. And it's certainly important to manage our stress the best we can. And that comes with the self-awareness that it's going on. And really do, go to lengths to give ourselves good self-care. And that includes teaching our children to do the same. Again, that will be addressed. So child's mental well-being and impact on family. A child's challenging moment, whether it's the emotional or the behavioral that we're seeing, can kick off a cycle that affects the whole family. Family members fall into automatic ways of responding to each other. And this happens in every household. We get used to coming home to each other. So our responses to each other can become almost autopilot. But with that, in a situation of, let's say, negativity, the responses over long term can produce patterns that makes child and adult stress and behaviors even more problematic. So it seems like it can almost be a cycle that includes both the children and adults. So looking to put a stop to that cycle. And that leads us to where the adults come in. So this is the adult guidance piece in assisting children to build positive mental health. Again, all of this will also apply to adults, whether it's yourself or your cared and loved ones in your life. You can use this universally. So just another moment of reflection. It's important that we as adults take the time to be in the moment and to meet each child where they are in their moment. So we all experience a moment together. We might be 10 people in one room. That moment is going to look and feel different to every one of us. We're going to have different interpretations of that moment. So if a child, or again, another adult, is presenting in a difficult moment, I think it's good for us as the responding adult to just take a pause, breathe, acknowledge where we are in dealing with this, but also acknowledge where they are. Because again, their moment's going to look a little bit different. And at this point, the need is focused on this other person, right, who's expressing this difficulty. So the adult role in helping a child. The environment can become quickly disrupted when a child's downstairs brain is activated by stress, mental health challenges. Adults can make a difference in how the situation turns out using healthy guidance. So again, we're putting some pieces in place for the child in front of us whose brain isn't to a point where they can think logically, where they can take a pause, right? They're running on that survival mode because right now their emotions and their sense of these kind of primitive drives are at play. So we need to be the calm, logical people, which I know can be a little difficult, right? When we're faced with some tension or some difficult emotions in front of us. But during these interactions, adults are key in helping their child regain ability to regulate and move forward in a positive way. And the key word here is regulate. We all get dysregulated. We might be in a place where we're pretty even keel, life's going okay, there's no major disruptions, it feels like a regular day, and then suddenly something changes, and it can change in a moment's time, as you know, and we're dysregulated. So not only children get dysregulated, adults again come with the developed brain, identified coping skills, hopefully a support system, and freedom. That's another thing that adults have versus children, right? A child has a guardian in place to help make decisions for them, where adults have some freedom. So that lack of control for child when they're having a difficult moment can also bring some stress, right? Someone's going to tell me what to do. Someone's going to be angry at me. It's not all on them. So this is where we can be that presence for them to help bring some regulation. And some keys to this, you want to try to better understand what the child may be feeling or experiencing and the possible impact this has on their presentation. So I know sometimes just in the hallways, school day has started and children are coming in and, staff might be great and excited to see them. And you get a child who comes in and says, today is not my day. Okay, you take a step back and you later learn possibly that something happened that morning that was a little disruptive to them. But you go with it, you accept where they are at that moment, and then you try to better understand where it is that they're coming from through their lenses, right? Not only through ours. You try to assist with providing what the child may need to deal or cope in that moment. And sometimes they'll tell you, hey, I don't need anything right now. All right, I'll check in with you in a little bit, right? Because that can change. And at least they know, hey, you're aware, you've noticed them, and you're there to support, even if that moment that you engage with them is not the moment for them, right? Because it's not our agenda. It's the other person in this moment that we have to be aware of. You want to help the child have a sense of control over the choices and the outcomes of the moment. Again, that goes with this idea of children are very used to adults coming in and telling them what to do. Of course, there's some great adults who give children breathing room, but I think we're kind of on autopilot when we're caring for children, especially in the world we live in. So giving them a sense of control and choice helps them realize that they can also navigate where they're at and what they need, and as opposed to just being told of what's going to happen or what it is that we're going to do for them. And you want to consider additional support for the child in managing their mental health. And again, we've talked about it. I know I brought it up many times in the beginning when going over mental health disorders. It's really key to consider what supports are out there. And if you don't have a sense of that, I'm going to get to that at the end, certainly, of the presentation. So I want you to all leave here knowing that, you reach out and we're here to help. That there are people on the other end that want to go through this with you. Suggestions for dealing with dysregulation, because one dysregulated person can easily make a regulated person dysregulated, right? We've all had that where, again, our day's okay. We encounter someone who is heightened, someone who is angry, someone who's really sad as well. It just doesn't have to be anger. And suddenly our self and where we're at is changed, right? We are products of our environment and we absorb what's around us. So you want to be sure if you're facing someone who's dysregulated, you want to make effort to not take the child's attitudes, statements, behaviors personal. It can be something, again, that we automatically do, and then our defenses go up. And we're not as helpful when our defenses are up because now we're looking out for ourselves. And we are also in that downstairs brain. We need to rise and be in that upstairs brain to help this other person through. You want to address the child's behavior and not their sense of character, right? So we don't want to shame a child for behavior. Remember, behavior is a statement. It's a sign of feelings that are going on within this person that we want to address, okay? And along the way, we don't want to damage any sense of character. We don't want to engage in a power struggle, right? The resolution of this problem doesn't depend on you being right or the child being wrong or another adult. So the last word isn't needed right now. The need is dealing with this dysregulation, and for this person, for you not to become dysregulated. You want to provide consistency, boundaries, and structure in the environment. This challenge the uncertainty a child or an adult may be feeling. There's nothing worse when you're feeling worried or anxious to not know what's coming next. So the more consistent we can be, the better. And again, you want to try not to add your own dysregulated emotions. And that's where it's key to take a pause and check in with your emotions before approaching the child. And again, there might be a child sobbing in front of you and your reaction is just to jump in and help. But it's okay to be there in the moment with that person. You're still being supportive, but take that step back and be sure you've got this inside, right? That it's not going to bring you to a place where you can't be helpful anymore. You want to work to create a healthy environment to help children cope. So approach and tone of adults make the difference in resolving or continuing a child's difficult moment. And the following suggestions will assist in diffusing situations with use of respect and to help display self-regulation skills that we want them to be picking up on. And, just because their brain isn't fully, formed and in a moment where they can quickly think of how to best regulate themselves, by helping them identify, and you're also modeling this for them, it's helping them learn, tips and tricks before the brain's fully taking it on. And they're absorbing this. So you want to try to stay calm, as we talked about, and not put your own emotions into it. You want to create a safe setting. You want to wait. So wait, again, reflects on the idea that sometimes we jump in to help a child or an adult and they're not there. They don't want the help. We can wait with them. You can, again, be a supportive presence. And sometimes that's the best support you can give someone in a moment when there are no words or they don't want to talk. They don't want anyone too close to them. You take that step back and you just wait with them. And that goes a long way, believe it or not. You want to listen. You want to actively listen. And actively listening means that we're in the moment. We're hearing what that person's saying. We're not in our own mind thinking about what do we respond? Who can we call to help? We're just there. We're just taking in what they have to give us, and then once they're done talking, we can offer, our feedback or our kind words. But active listening also goes a long way. We want to demonstrate non-threatening body language. Again, our, expression to other people is not just through our talk. It also is through how we are presenting ourselves, how we're carrying ourselves. It's often heard of if you have a child in a very difficult place emotionally, and you want to be present with them, to tower over them, in a sense of dominance, even though your intention is not that, certainly can be very disruptive, and can make the negativity this child's feeling, increase. So you want to just make sure you're having non-threatening body language. You want to use positive communication and always be respectful. And that's with any age. Just because someone may be saying not nice things to you doesn't mean we have to also say them back. It's not going to help the situation. And we're also wanting to teach them, again, how do we handle the situation? How do we regulate? Looking at increasing emotional growth. And this is key. So as the adults are helping children navigate through negative emotions, we're helping children try to learn better ways to regulate. We're guiding them through this. We're increasing their emotional growth. So again, the idea is children feel emotions, but do not always know how to express themselves in order to get support and cope with these emotions. Children learn how to respond to stress as they grow and develop through life experiences and interactions. And certainly, again, as I've talked about, that's where adults can step in and really help out. Emotional growth or emotional development is the gradually increasing ability to perceive, assess, and manage emotions. So this is something that as children grow through the years, they're gaining information on. It's through their experience. It's how they're learning about their world. So we want to be sure at best we can help make most of those experiences positive, right? No one's perfect and we're all going to have our moments. But if we can be that presence that certainly puts our best foot forward in helping them, they're going to grow from that. And this process occurs in the brain, and it's driven by physical and cognitive changes, and it's heavily influenced by the environment. And again, that's where adults play a main part, because I know we can't always control our environment. Certainly children sometimes feel like they have less control over their environment. So the pieces that we can help them with as adults, why not do that? Certainly, if it's going to be more positive for them. And by environment, I certainly don't mean we've got to move furniture around, right? By environment, I mean just the presence we bring when we walk into a room with a child. We also want to look at building resilience. So again, having these positive interactions, trying to bring